Hi Vanessa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. So today I wanted to talk to you about something called environmental ethics. So I've basically been taking a course over the past few months, and today I just wanted to ask you a few questions based on what I've learned, and you can answer them in any way you see fit. So today I wanted to talk to you about I wanted to explore environmental ethic theories like such ones as biocentrism, zoocentrism, and anthropocentrism, and how they relate to modern agricultural practices, more particularly like factory farming. And I want to see how these ethical frameworks offer different perspectives on the value of nature, animals, and human life, and how they can help us understand the more implications of factory farming and food production. So I'm gonna ask you about 5 questions, and you can answer them and never, however you feel like you want to. And yeah, we're just gonna have a conversation about it.
Okay, cool.
All right. So, how does biocentrism, which values all living beings equally, challenge the practice of factory farming, where animals are usually treated as commodities rather than individuals?
So I don't really know too much about biocentrism, but if it's about valuing all life equally, I guess that would mean that like factory farming is kind of unethical. I guess I mean like we treat animals like objects to be used instead of living things.
Yeah, so that's really exactly it. Biocentrism challenges the whole foundation of factory farming because it sees animals as beings with intrinsic value. Their lives matters for their own sake, not just for how useful they are to humans. We're all equal. In factory farming, though, animals are treated as resources, confined, they're overbred, and then basically essentially turned into tools for producing food for humans.
Okay, I see where that's coming from, but I don't know if I completely agree because, like, people do need food, and factory farming, I'm sure, makes it affordable for most of us. Isn't that important too?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from too with that. And it is important. But the question I guess biocentrism raises is whether that need justifies the harm caused to animals. Are our food preferences or economic systems worth the cost of denying animals the ability to just live naturally or even like humanely? It's not just a question of like producing mass producing these animals and selling them to humans. It's about or efficiency. It's about whether we're respecting their life.
Yeah, no, I get that, but it seems complicated. I mean, if we didn't farm this way, wouldn't food be a lot more expensive? Not everyone can afford those free range or organic options.
You know, I definitely see what you're saying, and that's definitely a valid point. And it's one of the challenges in applying biocentric ethics in the real world. But advocates would argue that we need to rethink, like, I guess, the entire food system and not just settle for the cheapest option that causes the most harm. So I'm gonna delve into a little bit of more zoocentrism, and is this is more so viewing the treatment of animals in factory farming, especially when consider their capacity to suffer and experience emotions.
So zoocentric means it focuses on animals specifically.
Exactly. Zoocentrism emphasizes the moral consideration of animals, especially like their abilities to feel pain or they're experiencing emotions and have preferences. Unlike biocentrism, which values all life equally, like even like plants and like things that may not be like actual people consider actual living things. Um, Zoocentrism is so centered on animals' experiences like solely. So from this perspective, factory farm is especially cruel because it ignores how much animals suffer in the process.
Yeah, I've heard that animals in factory farms are under a lot of stress, but how do we know that they really feel emotions like we do?
That's a great question. Um, there's a lot of scientific research showing that animals, especially like mammals and birds, have complex emotional and like social lives. Like for instance, cows form strong bonds with their calves, and pigs are as intelligent as dogs. So zootrism says that because animals can suffer and experience emotions, we have a moral duty to treat them better. Factory farming fails that test entirely.
That makes sense. I guess I can agree with that, like causing unnecessary suffering is wrong. But do we really have alternatives that would work to feeding like billions of people?
Yeah, see, that's a concern that you really have, and I agree with that completely. And zoocentrism doesn't ignore it. It calls for solutions that reduce suffering while still meeting human needs, like transitioning to more humane farming practices, or even shifting away from heavy reliance on animal agriculture altogether.
No, I can see the logic in that for sure, but like I wonder how realistic it is because people aren't just going to stop eating meat overnight, you know?
E- Exactly. Um, I guess so. That's okay. I can see what you're saying with that. Um, it's not, I guess it's not about saying we have all the answers right now. I guess it's about asking the right question. Speaking of which, let's look at why some people justify factory farming in the first place. So, next we're going to talk about anthropocentrism. It's kind of a word tongue twister. This prioritizes human needs. So, justifying factory farming despite the negative environmental and ethical consequences.
So anthropocentrism, hope I said that right, is it's like saying humans come first, right?
Yeah, they're the most important basically. It's like the idea that humans need and interests are the priority. Factory farming is often justified from this perspective, even though this isn't really like a popular perspective in like environmental ethics. It provides they say basically people from this perspective say it provides cheap, abundant food for humans. Even though it causes harm to animal and the environment, anthropocentrism argues that meeting human demands is more important.
So like that makes a lot of sense to me. So people need food to survive and factory farming makes it more affordable to do so. So like kind of going back to our first point, isn't that a good thing then?
I mean, that's the argument, yes, but critics like of anthropocentrism say it's short-sighted. I mean, factory farming might be efficient in the short term, but it's unsustainable in the long run. It contributes to climate change, deforestation, and water pollution, not to mention the ethical cost of how animals are treated. So while it may like seem like the easiest solution now, it creates bigger problems for the future.
Okay, I do see your point in that. But just to rebut you at the same time, it's kind of hard to expect people to care about those things when they're just trying to get through day-to-day life.
I could see what you're saying with that. Um, you're a very hard person to please. Um, so I guess we can move on to the next question. So today the next thing we're going to talk about is hold on. All right. Sorry for the pause. There some technical difficulties. All right. So we've talked about zoocentrism and how it emphasizes the value of animals in their experience. Now let's expand the focus on to something even broader, ecocentrism. So we're going to talk about what ways can ecocentrism, which values ecosystem as a whole, help us think our approach to agricultural practices and animal welfare.
So ecocentrism sounds like it's about focusing on the environment, not just animals. Is that right?
Yeah, basically. Ecocentrism argues that the healthy entire ecosystem, including plants, animals, soil, water, and even non living elements like rocks, should be our priority. From this perspective, factory farming is harmful not just because of how it treats animal, but also because of of it that it does to the environment. For example, deforestation to grow to feed crops, Deforestation to grow, feed crops, methane emissions from livestock, and water pollution from manure runoff are all serious ecological issues.
Yeah, I've actually heard about the environmental problems with like the farming, especially with greenhouse gases. But how would ecocentrism suggest we fix that?
That's a great question. So, ecocentrism would push us towards farming practices that regenerate ecosystems instead of depleting them. For example, regenerative agriculture focuses on restoring soil health, increasing biodiversity, and reducing reliance on chemical outputs. It could also mean reducing the scale of industrial animal farming and maybe shifting towards plant based or lab grown alternatives to ease the strain on ecosystems.
So it's not just about treating animals better, it's about farming in a way that helps the planet heal.
Exactly. Farming has kind of become this mass production thing, and ecocentrism doesn't see humans as separate from nature, but as a part of it. It challenges us to think about how our actions impact the entire system, not just our immediate needs.
That sounds pretty ideal, but it also feels a bit unrealistic. Like, wouldn't farming this way mean producing less food overall?
It could in the short term, but ecocentrism is about long term sustainability. Farming methods that restore ecosystems can actually make land more productive over time. And if we combine that with reducing food waste and shifting dietary patterns, we can produce enough food without causing so much environmental harm.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's definitely a big picture way of thinking, but I wonder how practical it would be to get everyone on board with something like that.
Wow, you really do have a differing opinion with everything that I say. Yeah, I can see what that's a fair concern. And I see what you're saying. So like zoocentrism, ecocentrism also doesn't offer those quick fixes. It's more about changing our mindset and working towards systemic solutions. And that brings us to how ethical theories like ecocentrism and biocentrism interact with the realities of our current food system. So, I want to go into more about those two theories, and I just want to talk about more of how ecocentrism or biocentrism lead to more sustainable and compassionate farming practices, or do they conflict with human driven food production systems? Now, I know you've said quite a lot about how practical it is and how humans are kind of like who don't have the money um need those like mass production farms where animals or the environment not be treated well. So I just want to know your opinion on that.
So I feel like they conflict a lot with how things are done now. Like industrial farming is about efficiency, meeting demand, and keeping costs low. These theories sound like they're kind of asking us to slow down and think more carefully, which seems like it would make food more expensive and harder to produce.
That's definitely a fair critique, and it's something that you repeated a lot during this conversation. The current food system is built on maximum output and profit, often at the expense of animals in the environment. These theories challenge us to rethink those priorities. They argue that while we need food, we also have a responsibility to preserve the ecosystem and respect the intrinsic value of other living beings.
But if we follow these theories, wouldn't it mean producing less food overall? What happens to the people who already struggle to afford enough to eat?
That's a key issue. Advocates for these perspectives would argue that we need systemic change, reducing food waste, like I said earlier, shifting towards less resource intensive diets or investing in new technologies like lab grown meat. This goal isn't to make food inaccessible, but to create a system that works for both the people and the planet.
I can see how that might work in the long run, but it seems like a huge shift. People aren't going to change overnight.
Definitely not. And you probably are one of those people that aren't going to change overnight. And these theories are not about immediate solutions, they're about guiding principles. They push us to ask hard questions about the kinds of food systems we want to build and the trade offs we're willing to make.
Yeah, I get that. But I'm still not sure how realistic it all is. Okay. Sorry, but I can see how thinking this way might lead to better solutions down the road.
That's exactly it. Even if we don't agree right now and we don't have all the answers right now, starting these conversations, and especially with you, is how we begin and to imagine and work towards a better futurism, a better future. And you really rub me as the anthropocentric type. You value human needs. You don't care about anything else but yourself. So I could see your perspective. And honestly, I was that way when I started this class. So maybe after you look into doing more research into environmental ethics, your mind could possibly change.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely admit this is giving me a lot to think about. I didn't really realize how much goes into these ethical debates about farming and the environment.
That's pretty obvious. And I mean, that's the goal. Raising awareness and asking the right questions. We might not have perfect solutions today, but every step forward after this counts. Um, and yeah, I just want to thank you so much for having this conversation with me. We might not have agreed a lot on a lot of things, but it's all about where we start.
No, like yeah, I get it. Like we'll definitely get there. I feel like these are important conversations to have.
All right, I'll see you later.